So what are the ongoing expenses in a franchise? And are they worth it? So they're called royalties. And what the royalties do is they're a percentage of usually revenue or profit, depending on the franchise, and they're given back to the company so that it can reinvest those into the business model. So is it worth it? Most of the time, they're the differentiator between something you can do as a franchise system versus something a independent startup cannot do. So a lot of times what you're talking about is you're going to be talking about marketing dollars, expertise. You may have a marketing team, whereas if you were doing an independent startup, you'd either have to do it yourself or hire somebody out. You may have a dedicated team that does nothing but marketing just for your franchise. And when you start talking about technology, it's the difference between being able to go out and have a $20 million franchise technology that helps you be better than what an individual could do it, because a startup may not have the ability to go out and do $20 million and invest that in technology. So the differentiators are all in there, but you get a lot for that. So in addition to that, you get support, you get a proven system, you're gonna get the supplier relationships. So preferable, you're gonna get those economy of scales, those preferable buying preferences. You're gonna get a lot of other things. Sometimes you get these national contracts so that day one you walk in and you've got a contract with a big box who's basically gonna say, hey, anything in your territory, we're gonna send that business your way. So there's a lot of things you do get for those royalties. And, you know, and sometimes you really have to look at it and understand, take a step back when you're thinking about it. I'll give you a great example. So I had a guy, he was looking at a fencing company and he was sitting there and he goes, man, he said, this technology fee. He said, I just don't know about this. And I said, yeah. I said, okay, well, you know, if you were going to go out and start a company, would you be able to go out and do the augmented reality and be able to go out there with a tablet and go out and scan the backyard and then 10 minutes later have a full workup that you could show the customer on site? Could you go in and do a bill of materials based on that scan? Could you go in and have that ordered at preferential pricing that afternoon based on that bill of materials? And you haven't gone back and grabbed a pencil or a piece of paper or a computer or a spreadsheet or any of that. It's already factored in everything you're going to do, the 10% overage, everything else. In fact, his accountant came back and goes, why are you paying for all this CRM? You could go out and get a cheaper CRM. He could. Absolutely, go out and find a cheaper CRM. The difference is this at the time was the only CRM that was built for a fencing company, and this is the only company it was built for. So a lot of those things are gonna provide value that you wouldn't get otherwise. And they're gonna be differentiators so that when somebody's sitting there and they're going, hey, well, Joe Schmo came out last week and Joe's Fencing Company came out and took a look at my backyard, and they were guesstimating it's going to be about a 550-foot fence. And so they thought it was going to be around this number. And you're sitting there and you're going, hey, you know, it doesn't have to be wood. Why don't we do this? And you switch something and all of a sudden they can see it and say, hey, well, you know, we can do vinyl, we can do metal, we can do all this. It's just one example, but when you start talking about royalties, that's what it's paying for, is a lot of those things. It's not a pure profit center for the franchise. Now, there's profit involved in that, and this is kind of the way that they get their profit out of coming out and building the system. But they're constantly adding new things to increase your revenue and increase your margin so that everybody's making money, the franchisor and the franchisees alike. So the other side of royalties is the percentage. And people get hung up over that, and they're looking at one franchise and it's got a 3% royalty, and then you've got another franchise that's got a 12% royalty. Here's the deal. It's about the same thing. Chances are, if they're expecting you to do $100,000 in revenue in a month, it's going to be the 12% royalty. If they're expecting $400,000 in revenue in a month, it's probably going to be more like the 3%. They're about equal pretty much across the board. They compete with each other. They know what the numbers mean, and they know if they were dramatically higher or outside of the range, that nobody would be going to their franchise. There's 9,000 franchises out there that they can choose from, and they would be going to the one that was preferential. So it's all about the same thing. You will see some that are maybe a little bit higher, but they provide a little bit more. So if you've got somebody who's got that national contract and they're going, hey, you know, 30% of your sales are going to be provided through this national contract. It cost us a lot of effort and time to be able to maintain those contracts. Maybe they build that in the royalty. Most of the time, they're going to be able to justify any kind of royalties that are even skewed even a little bit. And the other part of it is sometimes it's off of revenue, sometimes it's off of margin. My franchise that I was in, it's about 50% of the margin. So when you go out there and you start looking at it, the royalty didn't ever say in the paperwork, hey, it's 50% of the margin. But by the time you added marketing fees, technology fees, all that other stuff up, it was about 25% of the margin. And then about 25% of the margin ended up going toward your administrative fees. So you didn't have to have a full office staff in-house. You had a national office staff that was basically taking care of your customers off-site. So when you start looking at those things, they all probably roll in about the same place, maybe a little higher there or a little lower here, but it usually means that they're a little bit higher, that they provide a little bit more in the terms of value. Most of the time, if you're looking at the number, don't get hung up on it. It's something you want to have a conversation about, that's absolutely fine. The franchisor will be more than happy to talk to you about it. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it, take a look at it, make sure that everything's on par. That's part of what we do, is to make sure that nothing's out there that's just blown out of proportion. But also that's the difference between a reputable franchise and one that may not be, is I see these fly-by-nights. Trust me, I go to these convention shows and you walk through, I'll tell you, I went to one in Atlanta. It's not a small convention center, okay? There were 2 out of the entire convention center that I would talk to. 2 out of the entire area. That's the only ones that I would go back and I would say, hey, y'all have it buttoned up. You guys are doing things the right way. Let's have a further conversation. You might be a value to my clients. So yeah, there are some out there and they're going to charge a lot of royalties, but they're also probably not going to be on any list that I'm going to give you. They're going to be out there. They're going to be a whole different animal. But just understand, most of the time when you're looking at reputable franchises, the royalty, in the end, the dollar amount's going to be about the same. So don't get hung up over the percentages and don't get hung up over whether it's off of profit or whether it's off of revenue. Those numbers you can work out for yourself. Once you've gotten into the details of the franchise, you can take care of that. But if you want to have a further conversation about it, give me a call. I'll be happy to walk you through basically how I take a look at it and how, when I'm talking to a client, I make sure that the revenue is in line with the value that the franchise provides. All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing your comments.